All right, I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome to today's webinar, Crack the Code, Unlocking Your Child's Reading and Math Potential. So today's webinar, I'm really going to be talking about how to use assessment data to really understand your child in reading as well as mathematics. Now, obviously, we're a diagnostic assessment company, and so this is dear to our hearts. I'm real excited about showing you all of this. Okay, so let me just go ahead and start. All right, first slide. So I want to point out that children are more than single scores. Now, you probably know this, but I think we get so used to getting data. So whether your child has been in public school or you ever gave your child a test on your own, you know, a lot of times those tests come back with a single score, a reading level, a math score. But we're here to tell you that's not really quite true, right? Assessment is very, very broad. We tend to think of assessment as, you know, this one single point. And in the AI model, what you do is you assess and then you instruct, and then you get more information, you assess and you adjust your instruction of your child. But really, assessment is very complicated. There's all different types of assessments. And there's assessments that are very quick assessments to tell you something fast, whether your child understands something or not, whether they have an overall reading level. Now remember, when you get an overall reading level or overall math level, that's not very helpful to you as a parent, right? That just tells you that something's going wrong or something's going right. We're really going to be focusing on diagnostic data, and that's what we focus on Let's Go Learn. But some of this diagnostic data is really even stuff that you can do. So it doesn't have to be a formal test. So I want to really make you understand that. The other thing is, the term that's really important to understand is formative testing. What is that? Formative testing is when you teach someone something and right away you test them. So let's say I teach my child short vowel, cat, map. And once I know they know how to understand the short vowel sound, I test them on it. That's a formative test, right? Let's say I teach them something else, 3-digit by 2-digit multiplication. And then right away I test them on it. That's formative testing, okay? So just a little background. All right, so learning to read, right? So reading uses multiple skills, right? 25% of students have some difficulty learning to read. So it's very common. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the student. It's very common because reading is a lot more complicated than we realize. Different instructional approaches are necessary depending on the reader. Analyzing your students or your child's strengths and weaknesses is really important, because what you need to know is where are they strong, where are they weak, and then where is their instructional points at. So it's really important to understand that. Okay, so the components of reading. So what you have to realize is that a lot of times what we end up talking about is reading level comprehension. That's the end goal, right? So my child can read a third grade passage, or they can read high school material, or they can read college level material. That's really about, and they can read it and comprehend, right? And so that's really important. But the components of it are these other variables. Decoding. Right. Now, we define coding as having multiple subtests. So there's high frequency words, phonics, and word recognition, phonemic awareness and spelling. Those are mainly 3, but there's a few other ones in there too. And then there's also vocabulary. So someone could be able to read really well, but if they don't know the vocabulary words, then they're not going to be able to comprehend, right? Next, there's also comprehension strategies. So that's separate from comprehension per se, but strategies are, sometimes somebody could read really well, but then they're not really thinking about the text they're reading, right? Like what is the purpose of this text? What was the author trying to convey? What can I infer by something, right? So those are comprehension strategies. And then, of course, there's writing, there's grammar and writing. So I want you to understand and think about reading in this graph, or whatever you want to call it. This is a way to think about reading as you teach your child, or as you look at a report to analyze what's going on with your child in reading. Okay, so this is just an example I was going to say. I took French many years ago, and I actually could decode quite well, but my vocabulary is so low that really I have almost no comprehension, right? If I don't know every fourth word, then my comprehension is really bad. But I do have good comprehension strategy skills because I read English well. I know how to infer. I know author's purpose. I know all these traditional strategies, right? So this is just an example of where one piece can really be hindering someone's comprehension and you don't realize it, right? And this profile, by the way, even in English, is very common for English language learners when they're learning English. It also could be very common for just certain students maybe who don't have high academic vocabulary in their household. All right, so I'm going to talk about some components of reading that I think are very important. And it turns out that this is what we also assess. So high frequency words. So in English, a lot of words are not decodable, right? And you don't want students to decode them. So words are so common that you don't want someone to take the time to sound them out. You want them just to immediately recognize it. And so that's what we call high frequency words. So how does your child do in the Fries list or the Dolch sight word list? Those are the common words. The, of, a, right? Those are words that they need to know, have immediate recognition. They see it and they immediately could say the word or recognize the word without having to decode, right? So that's one skill that students need to learn. Now, the way our assessment assesses it, they hear a word and then they have to click on that word quickly. If they take too long, then we know they don't have automaticity of that recognition. Another one is just being able to build those words up to higher level word recognition. So words are actually leveled. So from the first grade all the way up to 12th grade, right? And we do rank that. So when students take our assessment, they're going to get a grade level score on word recognition. So this is another thing that's nice to know. How does my child do in word recognition when it's not timed? Can they recognize pasteurization? Can they recognize, habitat or whatever it may be, the different words? Now, phonics deals specifically with using phonics skills. And this is really important because we use phonics in order to decode words we've never run into. It could be a name. It could be a dinosaur's name. It could be a drug. It could be something I just never been exposed to. So we specifically teach the phonics principles: beginning sounds, blends, diphthongs, R-controlled vowel, short vowel, long vowel, right? And we go through all of those, and in our assessment ranks them in the way that normally it's taught. And then we're going to try to find out where a student is in that scope and sequence of phonics skills. So this is another good thing that's great. As a parent, if you're teaching your child, you can look it up. Even on our website, we have a list of, I think in our knowledge base, the phonics skills. You can look at how they're normally taught, but I'm sure you're going to come across that curriculum, and this is a necessary part of decoding. All right, phonemic awareness. This is something just to be aware of. There's a certain percentage of students who actually have an auditory processing issue. So if I say the word cat, and I say to my son's name is Justin, what's the middle sound in the word cat? Sometimes some people have a hard time knowing that it's ah. They actually cannot pull that ah sound out of the word cat. So phonemic awareness deals with some of the manipulation. And I know a lot of times the phonemic awareness, it gets very convoluted. People talk about it in terms of early reading, but I like to just say, yes, you're going to learn phonics, but then also you just want to know, how is my child's auditory processing? And we do have a little screener in our DORA assessment where it actually goes through some basic questions of phonemic awareness, and there's different tasks that you can do. All right, oral vocabulary is very important. This is not technically reading, it's just knowing what is the vocabulary level of the child or student. If they don't have a really high vocabulary, and we rank this from first grade to 12th grade, then there may be something you need to work on, right? Because if you're going to be reading grade level content, you need to be able to read an 8th grade history book, then you need vocabulary that's appropriate for 8th grade, and you want to make sure that students have it, otherwise they're going to struggle when they read. And the way this thing works is they hear a word and they have to click on the word they hear, and then it levels up and down until it finds a ceiling point. All right, spelling. Spelling is an interesting one because I know a lot of times people think, well, we have a spelling test, but why do we teach spelling, right? Because nowadays there's lots of spell check and correction, but spelling is really also a reflection of exposure. So when someone's low on our spelling test, so we say the word in context. So book, I'm reading my favorite book, and then they have to type it in and spell it. But if somebody does not spell as well, it could mean that they're not exposed to words as much, right? Because some of that has to do with exposure. Is it PH or is it F? Is it TION or SION, right? So that is what it reflects. And I think sometimes that's interesting to know that, understand a child's ability to spell. Now, also, it's a skill that you could explicitly teach. And, you could argue that in the business world or when people are working, it doesn't look good when someone is spelling something incorrect, right? So in order to prepare our children for the real world, we do want them to be able to spell a certain level. So I think this is an important subtest. All right, the final one is silent reading comprehension. And so we call it silent reading comprehension because students read a passage silently, and then when they're done, the passage goes away, and then they have to answer questions about it. Our passages are nonfiction, and they get longer as the grade level goes up. So not all comprehension assessments are the same. You can take a bunch of comprehension tests where children are given short passages and they answer questions, short passages and they answer questions. But in the real world, our opinion is eventually I may be handed a 40-page document and I'm expected to read it and understand it and maybe process it and come back and discuss it with a team. So I want to know that somebody has true comprehension ability of reading something, actually processing a long passage and later on. So that's why our subtest, our comprehension subtest is nonfiction, longer passages, and that's why we do it, right? The other thing we do is we do try to control for vocabulary. We don't put a lot of high vocabulary into our passages because we test that separately, and so I don't want to bias a student. So maybe someone is really good at reading comprehension, has great comprehension strategies, but they just have a low vocabulary. So I sort of want to know that. Is it a comprehension strategy issue or is it a vocabulary issue? But if I embed vocabulary into every single one of my passages, I can't tell because I'm testing two things. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, here's just an example of one of those questions. So how can we make a magnet? And then the student goes through. We do read the questions out loud because we don't want them, we're not trying to test whether they can read the questions. We want them to read the passage silently to themselves, and then we give them questions. And so we control for that by having audio support on the questions. Obviously, you hear me when I talk about all these things. We're very methodical about how we do our assessments, and that's really important. As a parent, you should be methodical when you're testing your child. Think about things, right? Sometimes they read something silently, they read a passage, and then if they just can't read the questions and they're missing the questions, then that's not really a test of their comprehension ability. Maybe they struggle a little bit with their reading, and so you don't want to put that double cognitive load on them, right? All right. So that's sort of an overview of reading. You have the recording, so you could listen to this maybe more slowly. I know I'm going fast. I want to get everything in. But think about reading methodically in these pieces, right? And think about how everything builds on each other and supports each other. So that's what's really important. As a parent, as you're teaching your child, try to break it there. If they do struggle with decoding, is it really about sight words or phonics, right? Or if they're really, really struggling a lot, maybe there's a small percent chance that somebody has a phonemic awareness issue. And in that case, there's other strategies you would need to do to help that child overcome that. And again, it's something that just happens, right? Certain people's brains are not wired to process audio as well, and others are. So it's just something that's good to know. All right, mathematics. All right, we're jumping in. And then at the very end, if I have time, we will take questions. But if we have time, I will maybe just show you a couple things in the system too. All right, learning mathematics. So foundational math is very skills-based, right? Concepts can and must be learned, but you also have to have those foundational skills. Mastery of a concept requires both conceptual understanding, right? And as well as having those skills. Now, here's another thing too. Math has become very broad, right? It used to be people focus on numeracy, but it really expands out to algebraic thinking, data probability, geometry, measurement, and as it should, because nowadays in this world, people need to have a broader ability. Math is really integrated into almost everything we do. Okay, so again, math builds itself. It sort of has this building blocks, and at the base of it is really your numeracy skills, numbers and operations. So that's going to be your place value, addition of whole numbers, subtraction of whole numbers, right? Multiplication, division, decimal operations, percentages. All of that stuff is sort of the base piece, and you need that when you're using these other skills. And of course, some of you even see here a little bit algebra requires some data and analysis, and geometry requires some data analysis as well. So there's some intermixing of the skills, and so that's why it's really important. Now, what typically tends to happen when students are learning math, and this especially happens in public schools, because public schools tend to be on this rigorous timeline. So if your child didn't get something in fractions, there's not a lot of going back and checking things because they have so much content they're supposed to cover. And plus, they've got maybe 23 kids in a classroom. And so this is what ends up happening. You have all these little gaps, and then overall it limits their ability to totally master and limit their ability to reach the highest level, which is grade level math. All right, so this is sort of an interesting way of looking at it. Now, conceptually, if we look at all the math skills that we teach, I know you're not meant to necessarily read all this, but here's a QR code if you want to look at this. This is really interesting. This is grade level, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and these are skills. This is numbers and operations, measurement, data analysis, geometry, and algebraic thinking. These are all the little things you teach. So in kindergarten, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like 12 different skills you're teaching them. You see? So you teach them across all, and then you can see as it goes up, boom, boom, there's more skills. And where you notice things get really complicated is right in a third grade and above, there's a lot of stuff they have to learn. So if they're not learning a lot of these skills, they could fall, you can see how they could fall behind, right? And all of these things, each one of these is a separate scope and sequence. So in theory, when you learn fractions, you're supposed to learn the beginning of fractions, and you learn each skill that takes you up this ladder. So scope and sequence refers to a ladder, right? How you teach skills. So math really is 44 subtests, and each one has its own scope and sequence. And obviously together, when you do stuff like word problems, you're using multiple skills to figure things out. So don't get confused. You know, there's these individual skills and concepts, but then there's also when kids bring it together, when they do complicated word problems and things like that, you need to bring in knowledge from a lot of different areas. Okay, so I'm just sort of impressing upon you that math is very complicated, right? And this document, again, is available. So when you take our assessment, we tell you exactly where the student is at within each of these ladders. We actually assess that adaptively. So you'll know, oh, my son is in 5th grade, but look right here, he's at this level. In multiplication of whole numbers, he's right here. In fractions, he's at that skill here, which is 4th grade level. So we actually will tell you all that, which really is informative for teaching your child if they are struggling, or maybe you're trying to help your child. They're in public school and you know they're struggling. Probably it's a foundational gap somewhere. So an assessment like ours will find those gaps, and then you can work on it. All right. If you want more information about our solutions, our actual assessments and stuff, you can go to this QR code. We do have a couple minutes, so let me go ahead and jump into the system, and I'll come back to this. So let me show you. Right now, I am logged in. So when you first come into your account, you come onto the home page, and I'm actually in a school account. The family accounts look a little bit different. They don't quite have as much clutter, I would say. It's a little simpler. So let's say that you assessed your child, right? So you would come over here, and you're going to be looking at math, scores and reports, math, or ELA. So first I'm looking at the reading assessment. Now remember all those subtests I showed you: high frequency words, word recognition, phonics, phonemic awareness, spelling, vocabulary comprehension. Those are all the scores, and these are grade level scores. Now this is real data from real kids, by the way. The difference is the names have been all changed, so we use this for our demo server, so everything is safe. But what's interesting is you look at students. This student, Wade, has green means that's the highest score. They've mastered high frequency words with a high 3rd grade, mastered phonics with high 4th grade. We don't go above 4th grade in phonics because it's not, you don't teach it. You expect them to totally master it by 4th grade. And then their comprehension is 5th grade. So that's interesting. Wade is in, 5th grade. Vocabulary, so it's really, you just need to focus on maybe a little bit of vocabulary and make sure that comprehension strategy skills continue to progress. But decoding is done, right? Wade has nailed it down. Now, here's another student who is, let's look at some of the other skills. Here's another student, flipped, mastered all sight words, but only is working on beginning sounds, 0.83. That score corresponds to knowing some beginning sounds, right? So they are not using phonics skills at all. Look at this, so incredible. 7th grade comprehension, actually. And they have pretty, word recognition is 4th grade. So I would maybe work on phonics with a student. I would actually, that's interesting that it's such a flipped. But I've seen this all the time. It's very common. And then sometimes you'll see students the exact opposite. Let me see if I could see one here. Oh, here's one. Very low Marian, very low high frequency words, but mastered all of phonics. So this student is trying to sound out every single word. They're using phonics principles. They've mastered phonics principles, But what happens when you come to an irregular word that is not, you can't sound out, right? 25% of English words are non-regular. So maybe you need to work on memorizing some of those sight words, and that would take the struggle off of the students, and their comprehension's low, only first grade. Although this is a first grader, so actually that's interesting. This is a first grader with fourth grade phonics skills. Interesting. Anyway, that is sort of a way of looking at this, right? And then here are your reports. We've got summary reports. We've got teacher reports, our parent reports. These are great as well. Let me show you one of these. Include recommended activities. So this report tries to put what I just showed you into words. So how Wade reads words. Okay, so this student, right, mastered everything. So of course it's not going to say much, but if it didn't, it would tell you work on phonics, work on sight words, right? And you would see the check boxes are the red X, and then how Wade understands words. So this student's all good, but you can see how we give a narrative description. We try to guide you on what to do, and we give a little profile. If they were working in phonics, you can see specifically which skills they need to work on. So some of the boxes would not be checked, and you know, oh, that's what I need to work on, right? So, and then we give you some examples. But this is sort of really quickly in a nutshell how that report looks. Let me go ahead and show you some math real quickly. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put it into the chat or the Q&A window, and I'll get to it. So on math typically, we're one of the only assessments who really drills down into math. A lot of assessments just give you a total score, or they give you some strand scores. Like, let's take a look at, let's see here, Harry. So Harry's at end of, just finished 5th grade, total score of 3.56, so low in math. And we could see the different scores across the strands, right? So low numbers and operations, measurement, overall pretty low. If I flip over to numbers and operation, let's look at Harry. We can now start seeing some different scores. So mastered green, mastered all of numbers, mastered all of addition whole number, subtraction whole number. You look at this, fractions looks pretty low. So it's interesting. Fractions is very low for this student. I'm going to go into the detailed report. And I'm going to go down to fractions right here. The double arrow is where we need to work on next for Harry. So this is where Harry's instructional point is, and this is the scope and sequence of fraction going down. So we need to work on fractions as part of sets. Harry will identify fractions using manipulatives as part of a set. So we need to work on that. And then after that, we'll work on equivalent fractions, representing fractions, identifying equivalent fractions, comparing fractions, ordering fractions, right? This is the scope and sequence of what you need to teach, right? And we want to, and Harry needs to get up to, I think we said 5th grade? So he's got a lot, right? He's got a lot to learn. Basically almost all of fractions. So this is a high priority area for Harry. But you could also look at the summary report and figure this out too. Oops. And if I go to Harry and look at the summary report, this is a nice, easy way to look at it. So here we show each of the subtests, right? Numbers, place value, and we put a red arrow by any subtest in which the student is low, and then you can see the scores to know which one should I focus on first. So place value, yes, we need to work on that, but some of those are really easier concepts, but I'm concerned about fractions and probably division over here too. Division is a little easier. So currently, Harry can use manipulatives to model division as the inverse of multiplication. So that's what he's mastered, right? That's his actual, we call it present level. All right, I have a few minutes left, so let's take a look at some questions, and I'll go back over here to my slide here. Again, if you want to go ahead and find out some more information about our products. All right, so here's the first question. How does DORA work? Do kids get grade level items? What if my child is below grade level? I know he struggles in reading. Okay, so DORA is fully adaptive. All our assessments are adapted. So even if your child's higher grade, the first thing we do is start off with decoding. So we do sight words, and then we do word recognition, then phonics. So if at the very beginning we see that the mastery points are a little lower, we're going to start off a lower point when we initially give them a passage. So we do this to not frustrate the child, right? And it's really a great thing, because a lot of times kids, if they know they struggle in reading, if we suddenly give them in a grade appropriate passage, they actually feel confidence and they go, hey, I think I did well. So that's how that works. So it adapts up and down. Likewise, if your child is advanced, it will go higher too. All right, so how does your EDGE series work? So I didn't mention that, but we have instruction. It's called LGL EDGE. EDGE basically will look at that assessment data I showed you and then create a personalized course for every child based on their assessment data. So it really is good at filling those gaps. It's basically personalized learning catered to each of your children. And it uses music, it uses graphics, animations, and so it really hits on all the things to optimize learning. Because music and graphics are good because it takes the cognitive load off of you. If you're just listening to some adult talking, it's sort of boring and hard. But if you have music sort of reinforcing it, intonation of the author's voice, it makes learning easier. All right, do you have something that we can give a grade 10 student that has dyscalculia to see where to start working with them? Okay, that's a tough question. I mean, our ADAM assessment will tell you their strengths, although it's a 10th grade. So I would recommend the DOMA Pre-Algebra assessment. Okay, so the DOMA Pre-Algebra assessment is shorter. You would see exactly where they're at and where their strengths or weaknesses. But the downside is with dyscalculia, which is like dyslexia within math, is that they may need some, you're gonna need to work on how do I accommodate them, because they may need things to help them to be able to read it. So they may understand the math, but even on our assessment, if we're testing them and it's showing them low, we need to know how do I overcome that. So I think the first thing to do is try to really diagnose their dyscalculia and see how can I have some accommodations to help them, right? An example, and I apologize, I'm not a specialist on diagnosing someone with it, but I know sometimes there could be something to help them visually see things better, whether it's a fraction or a number that's getting transposed. And is there a way to do that? Is it a different font? Is it having a ruler underneath it? But one thing you could do, I did say you could start with the DOMA Pre-Algebra assessment, and that would sort of tell you where they're at in different areas, right? So it breaks, because they're a 10th grader, it's going to break it into integer operations, fractions, coordinate graphing. So you'll get some kind of baseline data. But again, even our assessment might be off, right? Because your child may understand the math, but if their visualization of looking at math problems on a screen is getting changed, they may not be able to do the test because of that, right? So you're going to have to decipher and figure out. This is something I think you have to talk to a specialist about. How do I figure out accommodations? Is there ways, things I can do to help my child? Let's see. Yeah, and hopefully, sorry, that's what all I can give you for right now. But I'll try to do a little bit more research and see if we could post something on that as well. All right, any other questions? Looks like we have one more minute. How does ADAM compare to other assessments? My child gets a report from his school. So I would argue, one of the things to look at assessment is most assessments you get from schools, you'll just see very simple scores, right? 476, that's like a scaled score in math, and then or a percent, 25 percentile, 90th percentile. What we do is we try to actually give you a grade level score and tie it to a subtest, so it's tied to something specific. So if you get a 4.5 on fractions, that means that you mastered adding fractions to like denominators, but now you need to work on adding fractions to unlike denominators, right? So that's the difference with us, our ADAM assessment. Everything is tied to some actionable skill of what to do next. All right. Thank you so much. I think we're out of time. You will be getting this email to you, and thank you so much for attending. Bye-bye.